Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first special executive webinar. I'm Konstantinos Souzounis, CEO of ethosGroup, and it's my very special privilege to welcome more than 40 participants from Greek listed companies to our first executive webinar with Georgeson. We have with us important speakers from Georgeson and the Greek Stock Exchange, Mr. Dominique Brancati, the Chief Executive of Georgeson for UK and Europe, Mr. Alberto Daroma, the Head of Corporate Governance of Italy and Other Markets, and Mr. Ioannis Delatoulas, ATHEX Group Key Account Manager, Listings and Issuers Division. I would like for some of you who may not know Georgeson, I think that perhaps you must know ethosGroup. We are the listed we are not the listed, we should be listed, but for the minute, we are the holding company of Ethos Media, Ethos Events, and Ethos Business. And you know Ethos Media from Chrima Magazine, banks.com.gr, and our events. We represent Georgeson the last 15 years, and we have been part of the success story where we have helped numerous Greek entities and the state do capital increases, have very good attended meetings, and a lot of corporate transactions. So let me tell you about Georgeson for a while. Georgeson is part of the Computershare Group, which is the biggest securities registered in the world. It is the world's foremost provider of strategic shareholder services to corporations and shareholder groups working to influence corporate strategy. It offers unsurpassed advice and representations for meetings, mergers and acquisitions, proxy contests, and other ordinary and extraordinary transactions. Its core expertise is enhanced with and complemented by its strategic consulting services, including solicitation strategy, shareholder identification, corporate governance analysis, vote projections, and insight into investor ownership and voting profiles. Georgeson has been founded in 1935 with offices around the world. And as I told you before, with us in ethosGroup as representatives in Greece and Cyprus. I think that this is going to be an extremely important and a very insightful webinar. Without further ado, I would like to pass the stage to Mr. Dominique Brancati, who is going to tell us about what has changed in institutional investors' voting patterns since COVID-19 and how activism changed in the current landscape. As we said before, with my co-speakers, COVID-19 is now the new normal. Let's see what has been done and what can be done about the situation from listed companies' perspective. Dominique, the stage is yours.
Great. Well, thank you, Konstantinos, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join this webinar today. Certainly, the world has gone through some change in the past 6 months, and so have the capital markets and the ecosystem surrounding them. Institutional investors have been under pressure for some time by their clients, the asset managers, to demonstrate that they are just not voting with their feet, but are actually using their votes to ensure that they are taking companies to task. In the past, the hot topics were more about remuneration, share buybacks, excess cash on the balance sheets, gender diversity, and board skills. remuneration is still playing a big part when it comes to voting. However, we are seeing more emphasis on the environmental and social side. The G, governance, in E, S, and G, is a well-trodden path. Then the E, environmental, was second, followed by the S, social. We now are seeing a shift in focus, where the E is becoming more and more prominent, and the S, given the current situation, is gaining traction. The G still is the dominant party, but we are seeing and will continue to see a push by different groups into the E and the S space. Asset managers are getting more active than ever when it comes to climate change and other social issues. Asset managers are being more active stewards. The votes do reflect their concerns, whereby more managers are supporting environmental and social proposals. Over the last several years, we have seen an increase by interest groups seeking to influence a company's disclosure of their environmental and social impact and to pressure them into making a change. Unfriend Coal is a global coalition of NGOs and social movements that is pressuring insurance companies to get out of the coal business and support the transition to clean energy. Unfriend Coal have stated publicly, insurers have a responsibility to support international climate targets and align their business with the Paris Agreement. Climate Action 100 is an investor initiative to ensure the world's largest corporate greenhouse gas emitters take the necessary actions on climate change. Proposals by the Climate Action 100 investor signatories calling on major oil and electric power companies to disclose lobbying activities and improve governance on climate change earned record support during the latest shareholder proxy season. We have seen year-to-date 215 environmental and social proposals with an average vote result of 23.9% and a percentage majority support of 9.7%. This has increased from the previous year, where there was only an average support of 6.3% with a similar level of vote result. So we've seen an increase there. We are seeing different types of investors also leading the charge on the environmental and social aspects, whereby activist investor Jana hired staff for a new socially responsible fund, and Jeff Ubben's Value Act launched a fund with social goals. The shift was happening before COVID-19, but what we are seeing is a catalyst for change since the emergence of COVID-19. The social impact is going to weigh more into the discussion with large listed companies and them being better corporate citizens. COVID-19 is not the only thing that has brought a shift in discussions between investors and companies, but also Black Lives Matter movement has brought to more prominent light the impact of a diverse board. In the past, there were discussions about gender diversity, but we are now seeing discussions between companies and investors on ethnic diversity on boards. In short, we will be seeing a shift in voting patterns once all the data emerges from the last proxy season. But what will not go away is the pressure institutional investors are getting from their clients to ensure that they are using their voice and voting on the matters which count for the broader stakeholder group. Activism has also seen somewhat of an impact from the COVID situation, where activists in the past used influencers such as cash on the balance sheet, special dividend payments, and buybacks as a hook to create change in a company. Today, those same arguments may not resonate for the broader investors in such stocks. Activists have had to rethink their approaches to companies and how they mount their campaigns. It is true that many activists are waiting to see how the landscape shifts given the COVID situation. But we are 6 months on and the new norm is COVID. So activists and other shareholders are taking management and boards to account on their strategies on capital management and how they aim to move their business forward in this current crisis. Companies who have been publicly subjected to activist demands globally year to date amount to 536, whereas in 2019, full year, amounted to 877. And before that, in 2018, 958 companies were subject to an activist campaign. I don't think that the appetite for vocal and public campaigns has somewhat quietened down. However, there are still a lot of behind the scenes discussions which are happening, and activism has not gone away. Activists are here to stay, and they are adapting to the new norm like many of us are. Good activists are working with companies instead of publicly shaming them. With the amount of money in passive funds, we are seeing a shift in the way activists run their campaigns, understanding that in many cases, their thesis needs to be able to have direct impact on the governance teams at these large index managers. There are a variety of activist investors and the way they approach companies, from the more aggressive of activists, those willing to go public and mount a fight, such as Trian Partners and Elliott Management, through to those who mainly work behind the scenes, such as Value Act and Sevian Capital, just to name two. Activist investors source their capital from a wide range of family offices, sovereign wealth funds, foundations, high net worth individuals, pension funds, traditional asset managers, those asset managers that are invested in your stock. They also obtain money from university endowments as well. Activist investors spend a considerable amount of time and resources before a campaign to understand their target. They speak to shareholders, proxy advisors, regulators, current and ex-employees, customers, suppliers, and potential bidders. In any event, COVID-19, Black Lives Matters has opened up a new norm. And as listed companies, it is best to be ready for any type of engagement with your investor base and knowing who you are dealing with. Understanding your shareholder base, knowing who to speak to, when to speak to them, and about what issues is key. Understanding how governance teams work at the large index managers will give you an advantage when talking to them about the issues that matter and about the issues which they are under pressure to discuss and vote on from their underlying clients. I could talk a lot more about the activist space and the movement of money from active to passive and the impact on voting. But I guess for the moment, I'll stop there and thank everyone for their time. I hope it was useful, and I'm also happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Dominique. I want to remind everyone that you can use the Q&A facility of Zoom to ask questions to any of the speakers. Please indicate if you have a preference that your question should be answered by a specific speaker. I don't see any questions right now, so I want to thank Dominique again and pass the floor to Alberto da Roma. Alberto.
Good day, everybody, and together with Dominic and Konstantinos, I would like to thank you for your presence here today. And I want also to go on the dialogue that Dominic painted before our eyes, because of what he said about activists is somehow applicable to the large part of the indexed shareholders, passive shareholders that you have in your share capital. I'm referring to the attitude of investors in understanding, assessing the governance framework of the companies they are invested in, and together with it, being able to answer to the question that their clients investing in the share capital of the companies asks to asset managers. In this sense, I would say that transparency is the first way, the key to ensure accountability of the board. And the accountability of the board is the main topic that is always under the discussion during the engagement session. These may be declined into environmental accountability, social accountability, governance accountability, financial accountability. But if until now, and as Georgeson being partner of many Greek issuers since long time, since the financial crisis we were here, during the recoupment that the Greek market was making and still is making in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And now, during this pandemic crisis, then if the financial accountability was the single request in 2015 and before, now we have to consider other proxies to be on the table in the engagement with investors and proxy advisors, because of all are the clients of someone else, and the final client is the person putting money in the funds putting money in proxy advisors, and the funds putting money in the companies. So it's all about asking, answering the request of accountability. Transparency, we will see in a while. I put some slides on some data in some slides regarding these few months of 2020 general meetings. We will see that transparency is one of the main concerns we can observe on the Greek market, because of a lot of companies conquered their shareholders by providing the information investors were asking, and had no particular issue with proxy advisors and investors. Indeed, we can observe an average of large support in the Greek market from investors. On the opposite, we can observe that main concerns regards a number of issues, but in the end, all connected with the lack of information, which is the most frequent feedback we can observe in the rationale provided by investors, rationale supporting the against vote. In the sense, I would like to put some slides on the screen. Give me a second and I'll do. Here you are. I will just ask Costantino to confirm that is available to everybody.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Fantastic. And so this is, as the title gives you, as the title indicates, a preview of this proxy season, because of, you know, the COVID-19, and in general, the Greek proxy season starts in June, and now it has been delayed for some companies about 1 month and or until September. So the data are quite rough, but they give us a quite significant preview of what we can expect. In this sense, so we, as Georgeson and as already Dominic and Costantino said, we provide a lot of services. Some of them regards the engineering part, so voting process, and ensure that the shareholders are able to vote, in the sense of they know how to vote and they know the materials, so they are aware of what they are voting on. And so tracking the information from your company to shareholders, and then tracking information from shareholders' feedback to your company. And these are a small preview of a small, very, very simple and synthetic scheme of which are the main players in the market. Of course, you got the issuers, you as the producing part of the market. So where is the money, where the monies are generated. And then we got the investor community, which is composed of a number of different institutions. We can have Vanguard, which is the biggest indexed fund in the world, working on passive funds that are replicating index. And so if they are in a way blocked in their investments, because if you are in an index, you are invested in by Vanguard. On the other side, they are very active in terms of voting, given that the only way they can raise their voice is by voting, by engaging with issuers, by profiling issuers according to financial and non-financial performances. They cannot exit from the investment unless it is a very extraordinary situation, a very contested situation. In general, they can vote against, and they do. Norges Bank, which is a pension fund and in the same time a national conductive scheme, because they collect all the monies from the Norway state, in particular from the monies coming from oil, and then they invest in almost all the companies in the globe, and they are active both in the investment and both in voting. We saw last year Norges claiming that oil production needs to be more green. And so they started disinvesting in companies with low CO2 production profile and very bad performances in terms of environmental care. And we got BlackRock. BlackRock, which is, I would say, the biggest asset manager in the world, with all as active funds and passive funds. And so this is somehow the crisis of all the type of the investment firm in the world. They get money from their clients, they put money in the companies, in the issuers, they vote according self-created voting policies and or customized voting policies that are somehow delegated to proxy advisors. Proxy advisors that provides services to investors, which services they simply, until now, until 2 years ago indeed, said to investors how they can vote on a resolution. In particular, they said if the resolution proposed by the issuer is compliant with the voting policy of the proxy advisor and or the voting policy of the investor. Now they are providing also ESG rating services. So they are saying to investors if a company adopted a well-functioning governance scheme and or environmental and social scheme. Together, all this non-financial information come into discussion and becomes very important to the eyes of the investors community. As Georgeson, what we do? We advise issuers mainly. We advise also investors, but on projects that pertains to issuers. So activist campaign and or investors wanting to raise their hands in a more massive way than just simply voting. How we do it? We do it just simply speaking, having a constant and frequent and quantitative relevant engagement with investors for so many issuers, and so we are quite addicted and familiar with the investors' way of thinking. Way of thinking, that means how they invest, how they vote. And of course, we have to engage with proxy advisors that are somehow the first door that an issuer wanting to ensure the success of their resolution of their AGM have to deal with. And so again, we started engaging with the ISS, Glass Lewis, PERC, ECGS during the off-season in order to ensure that they are fully aware of the proposals that will be submitted into votes during proxy season. Same approach is followed with investors. I hope everything is clear in this very synthetic scheme. Otherwise, I urge you to ask, because I understand it can be not easy to explain and not easy to understand. Now, contested resolution in Greece in these 2 years, since July 2019 until 30 June 2020. I wanted to collect some information on that point as regards issuers, as regards investors, and as regards the proxy advisor side. Because I just say that proxy advisor means that they are the first advisors of an investor wanting to understand if a proposal is supportable or not. This means that large investors such as Georgeson, such as BlackRock, can implement additional resources to deviate from the proxy advisor recommendation because of they run their own analysis. Other investors that are smaller, that have little resources to dedicate to governance department, even if governance department are growing from time to time, that small investor will automatically follow the proxy advisor recommendation, generally speaking, of course. What this number says to us? they say that issuers in Greece that observed at least a contested resolution are more or less 1/3 of the total. What does it mean? It means that at least an issuer in 10 issuers had a resolution that has been opposed by 10% of the voting quorum. If this number is not to be, I would say, shocking at first instance, you have to consider that in Greece we observe a very concentrated share capital. So 10% of opposition means that a lot of minority shareholders, a lot of indexed investors and active investors, in one word, minorities, voted against. And the number also is relevant in terms of all the resolution. So 1/5 of all the resolution proposed in during this year period has been a contested resolution. Many of them, the graph below, many of them pertains to discharge of the board and auditors. And this is a resolution which is typical to some market and atypical in others. And the relevance of it depends on the legal effect that this discharge vote will have on the responsibility and then again the accountability of the board. 7 out of 41 resolution has been a contested one, with an average support of about 41% across the full resolution. So the 7 was very contested one. On the financial statement, we see a larger support from the investors community, with voting quorum that has been favorable at least for the 70% and only 4 contested resolution. Again, I'm going quicker on this slide. Remuneration report and remuneration policy, as already Dominic said, became the core contested item in the Greek, but I would say in the European market. Also, as a consequence of the implementation of the shareholder right directive that saw last year Greek issuers approving remuneration policy that are very wider than what we were addicted to see in the Greek market. Director election and auditor election too are somehow criticized, but why criticized? Again, reviewing the feedback from investors, we see that the most relevant feedback is that company failed to transparently disclose the director names and the director skills and characteristics, so that an investor wanting to support the issuer had to do it in a blank mode without understanding what they were about to support. Same rationale is provided for the bylaw and dividends. On dividends, I would spend as a preview observed in foreign markets such as Italy, such as France, such as England, and as a proxy for the future incoming AGM season in Greece. For dividends, we are observing a flexibility in institutional investors in allowing companies in freezing and suspending payment of dividends in order to create the liquidity to ensure that the crisis will pass. So if you want to take your money in the company, against last year's, you have to be little afraid from activist campaign, because of you will have a general sentiment of goodness in accumulating dividends. What about Proxy advisors. And what about investors' vote? We saw that remuneration policies and director elections were contested. On the opposite, or on the other side, this contested resolution have been contested by the proxy advisors too. In particular, we observed that ISS recommendations were 56% against on remuneration policies over the 20 about the issuers AGM we analyzed for extracting these numbers. So we can say that ISS has been generally against the remuneration policies of Greek issuers. Why? Because of they are expecting the same standards that are applicable to other markets that already implemented a vote on remuneration policy in last years. We are somehow observing for the first time, for the second time, this new pattern of dialogue with investors, because as of now, we only had, as Greek issuers, to state what we were about to pay to a director on the upcoming year. Now we have to say a lot more on the director payments. Somehow investors understood this need of time, and their vote has been materially higher than what ISS did, because of we observed on 216 investors, the 80% of them supported, sorry, these investors supported at least 80% of all the resolutions that we analyzed. While on director election, which is more familiar to the Greek market, they expect companies to be more transparent on what they are doing, on what a director has to be. Dominic already said that ESG became very important for the investor side. It's the skills required to a director is questionable in terms of where is the clue to an investor's asking, because of there is no complete policy on what a director has to be. For sure, it has to be competent on the company. For sure, it has to be independent if we are speaking of the net community. About internationality, about gender diversity, then these trends are becoming more relevant by the time it goes on. So you have to be, as an issuer, quite transparent on your board of directors. And this transparency, where should be? It should be in the proposal, and then it should be in the engagement relationship with investors. I can speak a lot more about these numbers, but what is the clue of my presentation is to focus on the remuneration policy, director election, remuneration report as the most relevant matters you have to care in presenting your proposal in the shareholders meeting, because of it's not about strategy. These are technical operations, and this technical operation has to be the focus of your activity, and we can help a lot on creating a perfectly fitted disclosure for these topics. Again, proxy solicitation and main steps. How we, as Georgeson, take care of a good end of the investors voting process. We start our activity since the fundamentals since the basements of the question. So who are your investors? Identification activity, which is made easier by the registry the companies has. We take care of updating it, of comparing it with other companies in a similar position, in similar business, in order to see which investors are in, which investors are not in, and could be interested in investing in your companies. After having made this, we start asking ourselves and to our clients if the governance framework of the company is compliant with the voting policies and investment policies of their specific investors. So not a general question on regarding best practices, but if you have a Vanguard in your share capital, then you can be flexible in terms of remuneration. You can't be flexible in terms of director. To make an example, if you have Amundi in your share capital, it's the opposite. You have to care the monies you pay, but you can be more flexible to the people that are in the board of directors. Having reviewed the governance framework, having understood where the concerns may be, we can start speaking with the relevant investors because we already have in mind the questions that they can likely raise, and we worked on the answers that can be acceptable to them. Again, then it's all about analyzing feedback and building up the material for the upcoming AGM in a way that is the most compliant possible with the feedback and the voting policies. There is a last, after the publishing of the material, there is a last round of engagement under proxy with the investors. This time under the proxy activity chapter, we will contact all the shareholders base in order to make them aware of the company's material, of the company's choices, and in particular to track down which are the most challenging investors because of they are against, or because they have serious doubt that needs clarifications and then possibly obtain support from them. At the end of this stage, you will have a full picture of what is going to happen in the shareholders AGM, because of the proxy activity is fully reported in periodical report that gather all feedbacks from the investor you spoke with, and of all the investors we as Georgeson spoke with. So the most secure output of our activity is the full awareness of the voting outcome. If the issuer is collaborating with us, and this is a big if, because we can explain you how to make things working, but in the end is the issuer, it is up to the issuer to make the changes in the governance framework that we can suggest. Then if this if is positive, you will have for sure a positive outcome of the general meeting. This is also why we started as an engineer with the proxy activity and the identification activity, and we decided as Georgeson to pair it with the governance and the ESG advisory, because we felt that given the market was changing and not only interested in the numbers, we had to speak about the governance framework and the ESG framework. And Konstantinos may confirm, if this question was not fully understood or not fully accepted by the Greek market in 2012, to make an example. Now, during last 3 roadshows we made in Greece, then ESG was the first question on our services that have been raised by the issuers we met. So for sure, it is a new attitude for investors, but it is also a new attitude for issuers, also to extract value from their own industrial process. It helps to fight the new challenges this new period, and the COVID is just one example of this new attitude in carrying non-financial matters that should be called the pre-financial matters. And non-financial engagement is the core of all the discussion we have with investors, because of the financial part is already well cared, I would say, by the usual IR activity. The non-financial part somehow is up to the IR team. In other cases, it's just not cared. In other cases, is up to documentation that is published by the company. But having already the documentation, expose your company to the negative evaluation you may have from ISS, because of non-investors will decide to vote after having reviewed all the documentation published by the company. Generally, they use the proxy advisor report as a summary of the various proposals. Then they can decide to deviate from the recommendation or not. But it's very hard to see an investor that has the resources to read 300, 400 of reports of each issuer and then decide to vote, because it's simply too much for them and for their resources. It will absorb too many monies just for a single vote. And this is why it's better for us and it's better for issuers to going out to reach the investors, organizing a conference call, organizing a physical roadshow, and explain by voice which are the governance framework and which are the plan of the management regarding both the strategic plan that is financial relevant and the non-financial structure of the company, that too is a pre-financial instrument, ensuring the accountability and ensuring the company is getting the results. With all of this, I will stop and leave the word to ATHEX in order to understand also what they can do for helping you in your life. But I'm open to any question you want to raise, of course.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's been a very good presentation, very insightful, with very practical issues from the Greek market, which underlines Georgeson's capabilities. We have a lot of very good participants. We are open to your Q&As. I don't see any Q&A, any questions right now. So I will pass the stage for the next presentation.
Good afternoon to everyone. Let me thank you all for your attendance. As in a moment, it's okay, I think. It's okay. As you can see on the screen, our topic is Remote General Meetings 2020 Experience. Due to the COVID situation, Greek companies are provided with the potential to hold general shareholders meetings until the end of June 2020 via teleconference, irrespective of whether a relevant provision in their articles of association exists. Recently, the period was extended until the end of August. In this case, the invitation to the shareholders of the general meetings includes relevant information and technical instructions for the participation in the meeting. With the implementation of this urgent measure, the running of companies is facilitated since companies are able to hold a general meeting remotely without any relevant statutory provision. The ATHEX Group, since the end of May 2020, provides remote general meeting services called AXIA e-shareholder meeting, real-time by teleconference to listed companies. Up to now, 16 general meetings have been carried out by using the ATHEX Group solution. There are a number of advantages when considering shareholder meetings with a remote component. First, offering shareholders the opportunity to participate remotely means that they can participate from anywhere they are, regardless of their location, making the meeting far more accessible to the vast majority of shareholders who are unable to attend physically. And second, holding a remote meeting reduces the usual cost incurred by a traditional one, including rooms and venue rentals or catering, and also travel expenses for both shareholders and board members. On the next slide, I would like to introduce to you our new service, AXIA e-shareholders meetings, which involves 100% remote participation and voting in general meetings. So, this new service comes to meet the need to facilitate the participation of shareholders in general meeting remotely and increasing their attendance, and also to enhance transparency and corporate governance. The solution given is a fully electronic virtual general meeting with easy access and voting for the shareholders, with secure identification, as well as with reliability. Consequently, the results are that all the processes take place electronically, so the company saves on both resources and costs, and that investors can exercise their rights as shareholders and take part in the decision-making process. On the next 3 slides, I will give you a brief description of the ATHEX platform. In order for shareholders to participate and vote at a general meeting, they or their proxies will have to create and use an electronic account in the platform developed by the ATHEX Group on the website axia.athexgroup.gr. The web voting platform is provided by the ATHEX CSD, while the WebEx set of tools and services is provided by Cisco and used for the general meeting teleconference. By activating the electronic account in the platform, shareholders will be able to attend the proceedings of the general meeting with electronic or audiovisual means, take the floor and address the general meeting orally throughout the meeting, while at the same time through the platform, ATHEX platform, they will be able to vote on the agenda items and receive information on the recording of their votes after the end of the general meeting. In order to access the platform, only a personal computer, a smartphone, or a tablet is required, and of course, internet access. In order for a shareholder or her proxy To create an account in the platform, a valid electronic email account and a mobile telephone number are required, two-factor authentication. It must be noted that the login at the platform takes place once at the first activation of the electronic account. If while accessing the platform, the above information entered by the shareholder does not match the data registered in the DSS, shareholders must provide or update the information through the operators of their share account in order to create the account in the platform and participate in the general meeting. A shareholder, finally, who has successfully connected to the platform is able to participate in a general meeting by teleconference, real-time, via a link sent to them by email. So, now regarding the voting via the platform, shareholders have the option to participate remotely, in person, or by proxy and vote for, against, or abstain on the agenda items of the general meeting. Before the general meeting, mail vote. We need a relevant provision with this option on real time during the general meeting, or withdraw mail vote until the start of the general meeting. In the next two slides, I would like to share with you our experience coming from the general meetings that have been carried out by using the ethosGroup solution. First, I would like to point out that at least 47% of the total number of general meetings in June 2020 took place remotely, real-time, by teleconference and through the use of electronic means. About 64% of the above general meetings took place via AXIA shareholder meeting. Up to now, as I have already said, 16 general meetings have been carried out by using the ethosGroup solution, and in the pipeline of July, there are 3 more general meetings to come. Regarding the shareholders' participation in the above general meetings, we have in 6 of them over 80% participation, in 3 of them over 70% participation, and finally, in 4 general meetings, we have more than 60% participation. As we expected, we had a significant proxy participation via custodians such as HSBC, Citi, and BNP Paribas. As I have already said, AXIA shareholder meetings gives shareholders and their proxies the opportunity to participate remotely and real time to exercise their rights and take part in the decision-making process. All processes take place electronically. All participants, panelists, shareholders, proxies, visitors attend through the internet. So, as a result, listed companies save on both resources and cost. Finally, about the best practices, listed companies should have relevant provisions of holding remote general meetings in their articles of association and should provide shareholders with the option to participate remotely via mail vote at their general meetings. Reasonably, it can be expected that companies will select to hold general meetings remotely via either wholly virtual meetings, no physical meeting place, and all eligible members attend via electronic means, or hybrid meetings where a certain number of members are physically present and the rest eligible members attend via electronic means. In the era of globalization and digital transformation, where the pace of change has increased exponentially, companies need to be able to respond to challenges and opportunities in new and innovative ways, such as to provide for remote general meetings. In the last slide, I have included the listed companies that have chosen AXIA shareholder meetings for their general meetings, and I would like to thank them for their confidence in ATHEX services. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delatolas, for the very good presentation and for showing that the Greek Stock Exchange, ASC, has been very quick to pounce on the new opportunity and the threat of COVID with a very good system. I think that these kind of systems are needed, and I would say that although I've been in general meetings since 1988, and I've attended a lot of very interesting meetings, I would say that the meetings that are done electronically are more efficient, can be scaled up much more easily, and I would say that they can be even more inclusive than meetings at a specific place, especially now that the audiences are also more international. So it's a very good system, and thank you very much for your presentation. And now if I can have all my speakers open the cameras and ask again from our participants. We have 40 participants from some of the biggest and most important Greek listed companies. We are at your disposal for questions. I'm sure that the presentations were very good and very detailed, but we will wait a little while if you have any questions that are particular to any of our speakers. In the meanwhile, I would like to announce that on the 17th of September, we will be holding our second Greek Corporate Governance Summit. Last year, we have partnered with Georgeson. I'm sure we will have Georgeson content again this year. It's going to be a digital-only event, since we also, as the Greek Stock Exchange has done, we have been privileged enough to have the reflexes to create our own digital events platform called LiveOn, and we have been conducting our events digitally, with 50% more attendance, with no loss in revenue, and new services to our sponsors and also the speakers and attendants. So regarding the situation in Greece, I would like to ask Alberto if what you've been reporting about the Greek general meetings and the polls that you've been doing, from this input that you have, which is the most important talking point right now, and what do Greek companies need to face and to address right now?
As Thanks, Consta, and I will also spend a word on the remoteness of the general meeting, because of what we face in Greek is a market that is becoming time by time more sophisticated in terms of participation of institutional investors, interest in the companies, and also the proposals and the format for the proposals is becoming more sophisticated and somehow, and for the main part, aligned with what we can see in most ancient markets in terms of large presence in stock exchange. I'm making the example of the remuneration policy just as a proxy of what we saw in Greece as a new outcome in the last years, because of the alignment provided by law has been followed very, very intensively by the issuers who provided framework of remuneration that is aligned to what we can see in the other markets. What is the lack is the disclosure, because I urge Greek issuers to align the transparency of their reporting to what we can see in the French market, in the UK market, to choose one of the most summarized one. Italians like words, and so we spend too much words in explaining our strategy. And going back to the presentation of Ioannis and this question, given the fact that shareholders, institutional investors in particular, are addicted to voting in advance, if you do not run an engagement, if you provide little information to them on your website, it's hard for them to understand where is the clue and if a proposal is good or not. Last word on the remote meeting. Generally, investors dislike the remote meeting only if participation, remote participation, but timely one, is not admitted by the system. The ATHEX exchange provided a solution that perfectly fits the investor's policy, allowing shareholders to interact with the companies during the general meeting. What we have to care, what we observed in these strange times, is that the movement from the physical meeting to the fully remote meeting and or hybrid meeting allowed the participation to stay stable and even increase, because in France, in UK, in Spain, in Italy, we observed at least 1.5, if not more, of increase in the shareholder participation. A small breaking mechanism has been the alignment of the voting platform, international voting platforms such as Broadridge, with the local voting platform, which is the one provided by ATHEX, which is the one provided by Monte Titoli in Italy, and others, where the proposal is too much complicated by the issuer, because the issuer choose sophisticated formulas, then the international voting platform make errors, and so there is a mismatch in the connection. So please stay transparent, but stay also simple.
Okay, thank you for this message. I would like to ask Yannis if your platform can support hybrid meetings, which means that it can concurrently run with the general meeting, which is held in a specific place, physical space.
Yes, we can support hybrid meetings. I think that we have discussed with some companies to hold their general meetings in a hybrid, but with I think that until the August, the most usual to see is the holy general meetings. It's more effective for the companies. And I think that the companies gain time and costs.
Okay, it's reasonable. Dominique, it's a pleasure and honor to have you here with our Greek audience.
Thank you.
If you can also tell us what the Greek companies should look out for, and what is your professional opinion on how to progress from now on in talking to institutional investors and generally reforming their communications, let's say, with institutional investors, also in bond and equity markets. I have, in order to help, perhaps I can share a screen with, let me see where I have it. There is a Georgeson slide that I want to share with you. It's this, the annual corporate governance cycle. I find that we've been, everyone sees my screen, okay? Correct?
Yep.
Good. For many years, we've been very much focusing on the first quarter and part of the second quarter of the year. Now, Georgeson has this full methodology about governance roadshows, risk analysis, agenda and voting, identification, all the proxy cycle, but take a look here, post-AGM voting analysis, important, perception studies, board composition benchmarking, governance roadshows, and the cycle begins again with sustainability, disclosure analysis, engagement early in Q4. So I think that this is one of the important changes in the last years that we have done at Georgeson to change the services and not be just on call for 1 month or 2 months, but be a strategic advisor to listed companies. Dominique?
Yeah, I think, look, you're right there. There is a full cycle that companies go through throughout the year. I think, for all the issuers, all the companies that are on this call, what is important to understand is one is, who are your shareholders? So understanding who the shareholders are. But it's not good enough anymore to understand the names of the shareholder. It's the type of shareholder that they are. So that you're putting them into a category where when you're going on roadshow, you understand that when you're speaking to the fund manager, that there may be someone else in the background who are making all the decisions when it comes to voting and the governance of what they feel the governance is of the company. And so it's important that understanding the type of investor, understanding who to talk to at that investor, and what are the key themes is what's going to help the companies on this call to get a better result on their communications out to their investors. And I think, yes, roadshow is part of that and going out and speaking to people. But I think the other part of it is really understanding internally what are the governance concerns, what are the concerns from all stakeholders, because we don't use that a lot. We use investors a lot when we talk about the things that we do. But actually, because of COVID and even before COVID, people are talking about stakeholders. We're talking about employees. We're talking about the supply chain. We're talking about the customers. Everyone is, from an institutional investor point of view, they are looking at all stakeholder views. And so it's now not good enough as a company to understand only what your investors think, because when you go to them, they're going to be asking you questions about all stakeholder engagement.
Okay, it's very important. I would like to ask all of you for a last statement before we close this webinar. Yannis?
Yes, I have a positive feeling, and I trust the new ATHEX service that we offer to the listed companies, and that will be preferred by companies in the future.
Okay. Alberto?
I will reiterate what I said a lot of times during my engagements with issuers, that investors are not demanding for their own desire, but they are partner working with the company. If the company succeed, the investors too succeed. So when engaging with them, you have to treat them as a partner more than compliance exercise.
Very, very good message. I think it's in the heart of what we do. Dominic?
Look, simply be flexible, be transparent, and be prepared.
And choose Georgeson.
Of course, of course.
Okay, I would like to say that Georgeson has invested in the Greek team for the last 15 years. Me and Labis Lucas are at your disposal to help you in this new environment with the help of our colleagues in Georgeson. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. You will be receiving through the email the presentations and some thoughts and proposals from Georgeson. We are all at your disposal. Don't forget that we publish a lot of good content for listed companies at our website, banks.com.gr. All the best to everyone. Thank you very much for being with me, and see you at the Greek Corporate Governance Summit in September. Goodbye to all.
Thank you and
Bye-bye.
goodbye.